Okay, I think we are live. All right. Welcome. If you are here live with me, I would love to just have you type in the chat where you're from, just so I can know that this is working. You can hear me okay. And we're going to get right into it. I'm really excited to teach another foundational class today, and this one is called The Essentials of Healthy Communication. I just taught this live yesterday in Bernhard Gunther and Laura Matsu's group program called Embodied Soul Awakening. A lot of people who are in my community actually have done that program and have come to me from them, and I went through it back in 2022, so it's really fun to guest teach with them. And we are in the season of Gemini, which has a really strong correlation to communication. So this is perfect timing. Eddie's here. So grateful you're here live, Eddie. This is amazing. So we're going to get right into this class. So what I'm going to do is immediately share my screen. So just give me a moment. And here we go. All right, so now I'm going to flip back and see if I am, yep, there's my face in the bottom right. So apologies for whenever I use slides. Sometimes I haven't checked this presentation out, but sometimes as we go forward, if there's text down here, like where my head is, sometimes you can't see, but it's going to be all good. So we're going to get into the essentials of healthy communication today, which is really just going to be, it's really just going to feel like scratching the surface of a huge conversation. Communication is really vast. You know, it's nuts and the bolts of relationships. But today I'm hoping to be able to give you enough to start to work with, especially if maybe you haven't ever had direct, explicit training in communication, which I never had growing up. And so I think we all know that healthy communication is the cornerstone of healthy relationships, as I say, first and foremost here. And it's kind of humbling for me to teach this stuff. And I'll tell you a couple reasons why right off the bat. First of all, I'm someone who loves the absolute heights of relationships. I love to go straight to the top of highly spiritual partnership, divine union. And I don't use that term, by the way, to mean a romantic relationship. I mean how you can use relationships as a vehicle for union with God. And so some of you who maybe listen to the podcast, or maybe you're familiar with my work, you know that I really go up to the heights of what's available to us, which is a very spiritual path. And so it's really interesting because communication for me, it is ground level, foundational relationship skills. And so I have to be honest every time I teach this, that part of me has to put my ego to the side, and communication is not the sexiest topic, right? It's not magical. It's not something that a lot of us who are maybe more up here, like floating around in the ethers, we need to be able to come down to the ground level, and myself included. So this is kind of why I teach, because I had to actually go back to the foundation in my life and fill in some major gaps. And so in my work, I call this level 1 foundational work, right? So it includes things like learning healthy communication, creating secure attachment, healing self-love, learning boundaries, freeing ourselves from codependency, and like really ground level stuff that many people who come to me who happen to be spiritually advanced, to be honest with you, have gaps in the foundation. And sometimes we like to kind of float up here. I know I did. And it's kind of humbling when you're kind of dragged back down to the foundation and you're like, oh my God, I never really learned about healthy communication. Or like in my case, I never really learned what a healthy relationship is. And so while there's part of me that loves to kind of skip to the super high level magical side of relationships, which I do with clients all the time, one way that I was shown, especially this year, of how I can really best serve is to be able to also make sure that we're working from a strong foundation. So I apologize in advance if communication isn't like the sexiest topic, but hopefully after going through the presentation with me today, you'll see how this is so useful, right? This is really the nuts and bolts of things. So as I say here, unless we were given a template of healthy communication as children's growing up in our families, which most people that I know don't have that, myself included. And, if people do have that, they probably aren't going to be here today, which is all good. But most of us didn't really learn this, right? And so we don't actually have like the skill level of knowing what healthy communication is, right? And so this really can set us back in our relationships. And so it's really wild how some of these foundational skills, which you can even label basic, and I know that word triggers people, but for me, it's actually okay to be like, oh my gosh, there's some things where I have to go back and I have some major blind spots around. This, for me, moving from a much more passive style of communication into learning how to just be direct and clear has changed my life, honestly. Like, I know that sounds dramatic, but this is what I'm hoping to show you today. So today we're going to cover three main types of communication: passive on the one hand, aggressive, which is the polar opposite, and then passive aggressive, which is a mixture of both. But we'll spend most time talking about what is healthy, clear communication, which we also call assertive communication. So when we carry any sort of relationship wounds, whether that's insecure attachment, codependency, or any variety of dysfunctional ways of relating, often directly and explicitly learning about communication is a huge game changer. And this presentation includes some of the slides weave some of David Rico's work. I know Eddie, who was here earlier, I don't know if you're still here, Eddie, but How to Be an Adult is, hopefully you can see this. I don't see myself right now, but this is such a profound book. This is How to Be an Adult by David Rico, and I do weave some of his teachings in. He has a really great chapter on assertiveness. And this book, I think, is not even, it's like 120 pages, but it's profound. This is a book where every sentence is kind of a truth bomb. And so I've recommended this book to hundreds of people, and everyone agrees it's a huge, it's actually one of my favorite relationship books. And so don't confuse this one with his, he has a series of books with How to Be an Adult in the title. This one is actually his first one in that series. There's one that he wrote after this one called How to Be an Adult in Relationships. He's kind of well known for that one, but I have to be honest, I like this one much better. I think it's actually much more powerful. So let's get into passive communication. Passive communicators, this was definitely me, and a lot of people who come to my community in my groups, etc., people who are attracted to my work tend to be, we have a lot in common in terms of the patterns that we carry. It's not every single person across the board, but I think a lot of you here will probably recognize yourself here. So passive communicators, we're the ones who have a lot of throat chakra, maybe things to work on. If you don't know me and my story, I had severe social anxiety for years and didn't fully overcome it until my mid-30s, probably. As a kid, I could barely look people in the eye. I didn't speak to people I didn't know. I just had a lot of issues with expression, and that's for many different reasons, but this was definitely me. So passive communicators were the ones that hold a lot back, right? There's a lot usually a rich inner landscape that we have, but sometimes it's hard to express those things in words. But then also layer on top of maybe, like, let's just say, our astrological blueprint or things that we came in with. By the way, if you have a lot of Pisces, Scorpio, or Cancer, you can be much more comfortable in the nonverbal realms. And sometimes it can be really difficult to kind of translate that into words, which feels very clunky. I still have a hard time with this myself. Thankfully, I have a lot of Virgo to balance it out, but I just wanted to say that yesterday in the group with Laura and Bernhard, there was a beautiful question that somebody asked, and she had a really hard time with communication. And it's kind of what I just said is that like difficulty translating the internal feeling scape into words is hard for her. So the first thing I asked her was, what is your Mercury in? And if you know your birth chart, check out what sign your Mercury falls in. And yeah, I knew it. I just had an intuitive sense. Her Mercury is in Pisces, which is one of those signs. If you're a water sign, especially in the placement of Mercury, you can have a very difficult time and maybe fall on the more passive side of communication. So it's cool. Check out your Mercury and you can read about it. You might just want to Google whatever it is. Maybe you have Mercury in Scorpio, whatever it is, just Google it and see, because that's like the flavor of your communication, which is really cool. So passive communicators, we hold a lot back. We often have difficulty speaking our needs or even knowing what our needs are in the first place. For me, honestly, I still to this day need a lot of time alone, right? Of course, relationships are what I love and what I'm here to learn about, but I still do need time to kind of pull back into my own energy to fully process and digest even certain social situations, especially if there was like a lot going on. Sometimes I need to kind of pull into my own energy. And so sometimes I might actually miss what my needs are, like in different interactions with people. And it might not be till later when I'm like, oh, okay, I see where maybe I bypassed something. So in my relationships, I immediately make, or at least try to create a culture in my relationships where it's okay to go back and revisit, right? We're going to get into this during this presentation of how it should always be okay to go back and sort of revisit or edit things along the way. These people also have difficult or courageous conversations are really hard for them, right? Being able to have brave conversations is definitely something I had to learn. And it took me several years to be able to speak certain things, like in a relationship, if something doesn't feel good, right? If a dynamic over time doesn't feel good. I used to be just so brilliant at sweeping everything under the rug, and just not wanting to rock the boat, right? So that's where a lot of this comes from. In a minute, we'll go down here and talk about fear, which is really like a huge part of all of this, right? Passive communicators also often have a difficult time setting boundaries, saying no. Sometimes it's very uncomfortable being seen and heard by other people. I know this was a big one for me and many people who come to me. We also have difficulty, facing conflict. So we're like the classic conflict avoidant people. Passive communicators oftentimes apologize excessively, right? This is something I've had to, even to this day, like realizing, oh, like we don't have to say sorry all the time, right? Sometimes we take over responsibility. Many times we take over responsibility in relationships. This is a really, really tough one here, making excuses for other people's harmful behavior and not dealing with them about it. This is absolutely huge. So unfortunately, what happens is that many times when people come to me and maybe they have a history of abusive relationships or disrespectful relationships, or maybe just people in their lives who just don't treat them very well. Unfortunately, I see time and time again that many people immediately jump to rationalizing or making excuses, right? And so we tend to this is kind of like also the classic empath as well. I'm thinking of the archetype of Pisces, but also Cancer. And sometimes we can feel so deeply into why someone might be the way that they are, and really feeling into all of their trauma and having such compassion for them, which is a beautiful thing. But sometimes that can backfire if it's just too much of it, because we're not taking care of ourselves. I'm speaking about relationships where there's where there's some abuse or mistreatment going on, right? And so a lot of times with my clients who have this, I have to help them come back to reality to be able to see things with clear eyes and ultimately to be able to hold both of these things, which is like, yes, of course we can have compassion for other people and why they are the way they are. But we also equally need to take care of ourselves and come back to ourselves, right? And care about ourselves and our hearts just as much as we care about other people. So, in terms of the nonverbal expression of this style, oftentimes people are kind of slumped over, poor posture, avoiding eye contact, speaking softly. These are different attributes. So I know a lot of people are familiar with this, right? And so obviously fear is a really big part of this whole passive communication style. We're scared of showing up and showing the other person our true self. If you really trace that back, it's really somewhere along the line we got taught or we developed the belief system that we're not worthy of being lovable the way that we are. So you can trace a lot of this back to childhood programming and conditioning or abuse or just even just messages that we get from our family, our friends, from school. Anything that erodes our self-esteem can really make it scary for us to show up as the true version of ourselves because we don't think we're lovable. So we hide that part of us and we put all of these sort of facades, right, or personas on. And that's how we present socially, right? So I know many people can relate to this one. So unfortunately, okay, let me just finish this one. We hide a lot, right? We suppress our voice, and then we end up really stuffing a lot down, right? We self-abandon. So sometimes because we can only do this for so long, it actually comes out in weird ways. Sometimes it could just burst or like erupt. It might come out in weird ways. And so we'll cover that when we get to especially the passive aggressive part of the slides today. So other times, if we really continue to ignore, right, these things, and we continue to ignore speaking our truth or seeing what we need to see, sometimes what happens is that, God, spirit, the universe will come in and they'll force things to happen. This is the story of my life. And so I know a lot of you can relate to this one as well. There's sort of like when we continue, for example, to sweep things under the rug, it doesn't go anywhere, right? It's still there in the field. And so sometimes there's just, on an energetic perspective, it doesn't go anywhere. And so sometimes there's a forcing of these things to come to a head. Now, if sometimes we have to go through these hard lessons, I know I did in my life, and then we learn to, what the consequences are spiritually, psychologically, relationally of when we do this. And so then we develop a dedication to not doing this anymore. And even though it might be hard, I mean, I was forced to change my ways and stop sweeping things under the rug. So it wasn't easy. But of course, the blessing is that when we take care of things as they come up to the best of our ability, we don't have to be perfect. I call it keeping things clean in a relationship. To be able to just keep the air clean to the best of our ability, we are rewarded. And oftentimes the dedication to doing that, even though it might not be, people might not be used to it. I've had this come up several times, especially with my partners. They're not used to the way that I kind of speak to things when they come up, but ultimately, my current partner, Joel, I think he's really come to appreciate it. Like he said to me the other day, he's like, I'm really happy that you just say the thing rather than just sit on it and just get all weird. So, I think it's something that might take a little while for people to get used to. And we'll get to that when we get to healthy, open communication, because there's some adjustments that can happen in relationships. So overcoming this style obviously requires us to take risks, right? Speak when our voice shakes. I have to this day still have to do that. And, this is one too that's kind of, I know it's a little bit hard to swallow, but like if a relationship is one where it's not safe for you to be seen and heard, is that really a relationship that you want to be in? I mean, I know that that's a lot, but like it's just something to start to think about, right? So the aggressive style, which is the polar opposite, I don't really need to spend too much time on this because we all really know this, right? We all know this one. These are the people who have no problem blaming other people, pointing the finger. They'll tell you what they want and they need straight away, but oftentimes it comes out in a narcissistic way versus just a healthy way, right? And this style really all about power over other people to control or manipulate them. So some specific examples: putting other people down, right, through name calling, insulting or blaming, interrupting or talking over other people, constantly wanting to prove everybody wrong, obviously like yelling or using an intimidating tone, threatening consequences. You'll regret this. It's just, you can tell, you can very much tell, even as I read this, like I'm very sensitive to energy. And so like most of us understand this one. Threatening body language, refusing to listen or acknowledge other people's perspectives, right? This is a very narcissistic way of being, my way or the highway, right? I'm not open to anyone else's perspective, right? And then publicly embarrassing or humiliating someone. So these are just some examples. There's so many more. And so passive aggressiveness, I know a lot of you know this already, but it's good to just kind of cover it. I forgot to put a G here. I'm just realizing that's my Virgo coming in. Okay, so this is really common in codependency. In fact, all of the prior styles are as well, right? But this is kind of when negative feelings are there and they come out, but they come out indirectly rather than the person talking about them openly. So it can look like using language with a lot of subtext. You're not really saying the thing directly, right? But there's all this kind of stuff around it. Sighing and using negative body language or energy. Like these are the people where it's so clear they're not happy, but they're not saying it out loud. And it's just so obvious, but they're not willing to say it. Expecting other people to be mind readers and then becoming resentful when your needs aren't met. This is one I just used to, I definitely can claim this one when I was younger. And when we are a little bit more sensitive, right, or empathic, or maybe you have Pisces or the water signs, right? We are very psychic, maybe even telepathic, and we can feel energy and all this stuff, which is beautiful. That is part of communication. But I think for me, I've had to realize that other people are not mind readers. And it's so beneficial when we can actually just speak the thing. I mean, on a level of soul development, I'll just say it, I'll just go right in there. I think it really benefits us to be able to learn how to have direct, open, clear communication, as well as being proficient in sort of the nonverbal realms. It's really beautiful to be able to have both. And so, this was definitely a muscle that I had to build, and it makes me a more whole person. And so this is a hard one though. Like, unless we actually clearly communicate to other people where we're at, what our needs are, we don't have any business becoming resentful when our needs aren't getting met, right? Using sarcasm is kind of a classic passive aggressive thing. I still am a little bit sarcastic to this day, but we were talking about this yesterday. Sarcasm has a whole sort of spectrum, right? So sometimes sarcasm can be funny or light or whatever, or humorous. Other times it can be really kind of nasty, right? Like you can tell the person maybe is just really like bitter. So there's a lot of different flavors of that. I'm still not saying sarcasm is great, but I just wanted to put that in. Saying I'm fine when it's clear you're not. I think I used to do this all the time too. I can own some of these. Giving someone the silent treatment, withholding love as a way to punish, right? It's like we're using this particular style to really kind of punish the other person, but we don't want to actually say the thing that's going on. Forgetting to do certain things for other people, sabotaging other people, gossiping, interfering behind the scenes. So often when we're conflict avoidant, as I said before in the passive slide, our needs go under the surface, but then over time, the tension of the unmet needs starts to boil because those things don't go anywhere, right? And it can lead to these types of behaviors. Okay, so now we're going to get into assertive communication. So this is really where we get into the healthy, open, honest, clear, direct communication with love. So assertiveness is not aggressiveness. This book really helped me to understand that because it's really interesting how the word assertive many times I had a conceptualization, I mean, even maybe a little bit still now, that the word assertive means aggressive, right? But this is actually not true. I mean, he really talks about it well in this book. And it's so interesting that many of us were programmed to believe this, right? Especially women. And so there's almost, especially for women, I do see that there's a resistance to assertiveness in general because we think that it's aggressive, right? This is for many of us who maybe were programmed with the more passive feminine, which is all of the women in my family. So, assertiveness is really just, let's see where I call it. I love how David Rico calls assertiveness owning your power, the way of the healthy ego. This book, in fact, is quite about building a healthy ego, which a lot of us who are more spiritual, this is kind of another way to say what I was saying before, which is like when you're really spiritually advanced, especially if you have a lot of Pisces like me, Pisces is all about dissolution of the ego. We just want to merge, right? Like we are all one, really. It lands for many of us who have the water signs. And so thankfully, I do have a lot of earth to bring me down because a healthy ego is actually really essential. So when we do return to the foundations, like in this relationship work, a lot of it is about building a healthy ego that you then build upon, right? And so learning assertive communication is actually part of that. So I don't want to skip past this one. Learning these skills can actually begin to reverse patterns of codependency within family systems, romantic relationships, and across the board for sure. Like, even though skill building is only one facet of learning how to do relationships in a healthier way, it's definitely a big one, right? And so if we think about how do we repair our relationship, how do we make our relationships healthy? Yes, trauma healing is part of it, right? Going back, doing inner child work, trauma healing, that's part of it. But there's also a really beautiful piece that I see a lot of people skipping, which is actually that there are some things like communication or conflict resolution that are actually just skills that we can learn and then practice in our present day life. So oftentimes I tell clients when we work together, it's a combination of going back and doing the healing work that we need to, but also the present day stretching of learning these skills and actually putting them into practice. Just like we have to go to the gym and build muscles, right? A lot of this in terms of skill building, we just have to learn the skills and then put them into practice time and time and time again. And so, David Rico in the book, it's just, this is one of his sentences, which is like, oh my God. But he says, say yes when you mean yes, no when you mean no, and maybe when you mean maybe. It's like for those of us who haven't learned this, it's just like, what, wait, what? And it's so wild, right? Because like, when did we ever learn not to do this, right? But this is because of the programming that we got from childhood and all of the things that made it difficult for us to show up real, and so share your feelings, choices, and agenda openly with people. Discuss your doubts, fears, and intuitions with those whom they concern. This is a big one. I just want to pause for a second. A lot of us who are maybe more psychic or intuitive, or again, like we can feel energy, we're empathic. We read the energy. We read the energy, and sometimes we come up with what seems like intuitions, and a lot of times our intuitions are spot on, but not always. Sometimes these can turn into assumptions because we all have this sort of layer, right, of our humanity. of our programming, of our trauma, of our wounds. And unless you can truly say you're fully healed of all of that stuff and you're not projecting anymore, I feel like it's kind of rare to claim that you truly have a clear channel. That's why if you have an intuition about something, it's really good, especially if it's like a big deal, right? Of you making an assumption about something. You want to check those out. You want to actually put words to it and get curious with the other person, right? Like if you have an intuition that maybe someone's mad at you, but they're not actually in reality, like it's good to just ask, like, hey, is everything okay? Like just opening the conversation like that. This is something that my partner and I both had to work on because we're very much in the intuitive realms. And so, sometimes it's like, yeah, it's very easy to sort of skip past the asking questions part of things. This is where it's like not magical and it's not sexy sometimes, but it is part of the nuts and bolts of healthy, clear communication. And it's okay for us when we are assertive people, it's okay to tell people it's not acceptable for them to judge, hurt, or blame you. This is for those of us who maybe have abusive childhoods or any history of mistreatment. This is often like, wow, like just allowing that to digest and process in your system is oftentimes huge, right? And so we have to be able to give ourselves permission and to know first and foremost it's okay, and then practice it. I'm not saying that overnight it's going to be easy to speak the thing, but this is kind of where we start, right? It's like waking up to the truth and the reality of the situation, which is like you get to actually tell people it's not okay, right, for you to hurt me. Ask for acknowledgement of your feelings, nurturance, or appreciation if that's what's needed for you. I love this one because I feel like in like the spiritual PC land, it's sort of like we're not supposed to need each other. Like if a relationship is like not warm and loving, and that's something that you need, oftentimes you'll see, well, it's your problem, right? Like we're told that it's somehow our problem, and it means maybe that we're too needy or something. But if you really need and want your relationships to be filled with more love, connection, and warmth, then you get to ask for that. I'm not saying that like if there's a truth to the fact that maybe you have really, really anxious attachment, right? That you also don't sort of soothe your own wounds. But I actually love this one quite a bit. This is another big one. Finish your emotional unfinished business directly with the people involved or in therapy, because this is another one. These things aren't going to magically disappear. You can kind of say this is like our baggage, right? And if you're not able to process it directly with the people involved, then we do have a responsibility to take care of it, right? I mean, for most people, that would involve working with a therapist or a professional support person is always really good if you can find someone good, right? Sometimes you can do this work on your own, but for the most part, relational wounds that we have are really best healed in relationships. So it's really beautiful to find someone. It could even be a trusted friend or family member or somebody in your life who's compassionate and can hear you. And assertive communication also involves admitting our mistakes and making amends. And I love this idea of repair because repair has been huge for me in relationships, especially as I've shifted into getting really clear on like what a healthy relationship is. I had to make a lot of adjustments to how I was showing up in relationships. My communication is one example of how I had to get more brave with saying the things. And it's a messy path and it's very, very human. And so sometimes I've stumbled or maybe said the wrong things. And you know what? It's okay. For those of us who have more passive styles of communication, a lot of times we have this stranglehold on our throat and we're frozen and we can't say the thing. As that was unfreezing for me and I started to get more brave little by little with speaking, I also had to give myself full permission to be really human with it. And so sometimes I have said the wrong thing, and it's okay for all of us to be able to go back and say, I'm so sorry, right? Let's talk about this. And to repair is a really big thing in all relationships, I feel like the culture of a healthy relationship makes a lot of room for repair, and so this is a big one. So the basic rights of an assertive person, this is a part of David Rico's book that I absolutely love. And to this day, as I read this, these are these are ones I'm still digesting some of these, right? But I mean, it's so refreshing to be able to know that this is actually all of this stuff is healthy. So the first one, to ask for 100% of what you want from 100% of the people in your life 100% of the time. That is our right. That's our right. Now, I don't know if I do this 100% of the time, but it's something to shoot for. So don't get tripped up on the 100% thing. But it's actually really great to just like meditate on this one of like, why wouldn't it be okay? Right. So this is like a really good one to ponder. It's also our right to enjoy emotional and physical safety. Nobody has the right to hurt you, even if they love you. This is one that many of us who have the abusive backgrounds can come back to time and time again. This is part of reprogramming our brains to know that nobody has the right to hurt us. It sounds so like obvious, but to many of us, it's not, right? And so this is something that a lot of us, we have to really take this one in fully, right? And so we also have the right to have the freedom to change our mind or make mistakes. This path is really human. It's not about perfection. If you are going to lean into healthy relationships and practicing those, part of it is just loving yourself and your humanity so much and trusting yourself that you're going to try the best that you can. But it's inevitable. We're going to make mistakes. And so the more that we can give ourselves permission to make mistakes, we can give other people that grace too, right? So this is a big one. We also have the right to decide when and whether or not we are responsible for finding solutions to everybody else's problems or taking care of their needs. This is a really good one, especially for those of us who fall on the rescuer side of things, right? If you're not familiar with the drama triangle, there's those three positions: victim, rescuer, persecutor, right? That this is huge. Also, I speak to this directly in my work with people. And many people who come to me fall into the more rescuer category. We also have the right to say no or to have time to think before making a decision. So beware of relationships or people who are really forcing you to, make a quick decision, right, on their timeline. Especially if it's a really big decision, you get to ask for time to think, right? We also get to be illogical in making decisions. I really love this one because, wow, in my marriage, we were together almost 20 years. This was a huge theme. I'm somebody who's much more feeling and intuition based, and he was much more logical, rational, right? And so one of the main themes whenever we would butt heads is that whenever I would be coming from feelings and intuition, for him, it just was not logical, right? So he would always like try to force me to present a bullet point list of evidence-based logical things. And I just like, I tried so hard. I tried so hard, but I wasn't able to, right? And so again, you can also see that's the dichotomy of the masculine and feminine that's kind of butting heads a little bit. Much to say about that, but I actually really like this one because sometimes our decisions, if they're coming from the heart or our intuition or a soul level, sometimes they don't make sense to other people, and that's okay. If we can all learn how to be led by our heart and our soul, it doesn't matter if it's illogical to other people. We also get to decide how much of ourselves or our lives to reveal, right? Like how transparent do we want to be? How metaphorically naked do we want to be? We don't actually owe anybody anything, right? So we can be a little bit more boundaried with ourselves. It depends on the person, depends on the situation, but this is a really good one too. And we also get to be non-assertive when we see that as appropriate. So this is really good. And he just is pointing to the fact that in some relationships where it's truly not safe, right? When we know the other person is going to freak out or get violent, like, use your intuition, use your knowingness to know that this is actually not safe to be non-assertive, right? So that one kind of goes without saying, but it's probably good to say anyway. Okay, so we're actually getting kind of close to the end, and this was, a very broad brush strokes, as they say here. But I just wanted to put some examples of assertiveness and boundaries with love, because these two things go hand in hand. Hopefully that you can see that the setting of boundaries, which, by the way, that was the last YouTube live class that I taught, was the art of boundaries. And so I'll put a link in the description to this video if you missed that. I think I talked for about an hour and taught for about an hour about boundaries, which is another foundational skill that many people who come to me need help with. And I certainly did. I'm here to, I often joke with my clients, we're here to get, PhD, at least master's level in boundaries for many of us. And so for me, the essence of healthy communication is actually a combination of love and connection plus truth. And when you get to the higher levels spiritually, you start to understand that love and truth actually come together, right? So when we're down here at the ground level, they seem to be these almost polar opposite things, right? But we can actually strive for a combination of both. So when I teach boundaries, I often teach boundaries with love, right? And so there's a way for us to maintain connection and warmth and honoring the relationship while also honoring boundaries and ourselves. So I'm not going to read every single one of these. If you want to take a screenshot, you can of this one or come back to it later. I'll just pick a few just so you can see, right? The formula here is it's being able to take care of my needs and maintain the connection. So here's an example. I'd love to help, but I need to rest tonight, right? I can't commit to that this week, but I hope it goes really well, right? I care about our relationship, so I need this conversation to stay respectful. I want us to work through this together. I'm not okay with yelling. Let's see, what else do I want to cover here? This one too, I need some alone time right now, but it's not about you. I do need to use this quite often because in my relationships, I'm more introverted than probably your average person. And although I've stretched into, beyond that, and I certainly don't like for any of us to put fixed labels on ourselves, the truth is that I still do really need a lot of alone time, right? And I don't quite get it a lot with with mothering and all the things, right? But it's essential for me to process, to digest, to come back to myself. So a lot of times, especially in relationships, we're taught that alone time or taking separate time is so. A lot of people have a view where that's like a danger or something's wrong, right? We get fed this view of relationships where the perfect couple is together 24/7 or something. That's not true. That's not true. And if you've ever heard me teach on what I call the dance of union and separation, this is probably the number one skill that you can bring into relationships to protect against codependency. So the balance of union and separation, coming together, deep intimacy and closeness and connection, but also separating out into your own energy and really learning how to dance is huge. So, in my relationship, we both need that, but we also love to be together. And so we build this in to the culture of our relationship. But for people who maybe they get scared, maybe they take it personally, maybe they think you're mad at them, it can be good to say, hey, it's not about you, right? I just need some alone time. So, there's other examples here that you can read on your own time, but hopefully that it just lands. The overall thing is that we can set boundaries with love, and we can also just be assertive in general without being cold and robotic. There's actually a really good book on boundaries. I think it's called Boundaries, where I end and you begin, or something like that, where it's very good, but I feel like she's teaching you how to be like a robot. Like it's almost like some of the language is very cold almost. Um, and I just want to say, depending on the person or the context, maybe sometimes you do have to be very direct. And it doesn't always have to be padded with like this blanket, right, of love. But for many of us with our close people, I would say it's important to also just maintain that connection, right? And so I think this is our last slide. We just have a couple more slides and then we're finished. By the way, when I'm in my slides, I can't see the chat. So I'll click over in a moment and I'll see the chat, and then I'll leave a few minutes for questions at the end. Okay, so why is all of this important, right? Why do we need to learn about this really like unmagical, unsexy topic of communication? Learning to develop open, clear, honest communication with love, it really is one of the most critical relationship skills. I can't tell you how, I mean, the clients who come to me are the most amazing, brilliant, talented, spiritually evolved often people. And so sometimes it hurts me to watch that there's certain foundational skills such as this one that they just aren't seeing, right? And if they knew this, it would totally change the trajectory of their relationships and of their life. So this stuff really, really matters, right? So hopefully in this presentation, maybe there's a couple things that really hit home for you, right? That you can take away, because honestly, this style of communication, it's just, if you think about the heart and the soul of it, it's about us showing up real, authentically, showing the other person who we really are. We're not hiding. We're expressing our true self to the other person. And this gives us the chance to have people truly get to know us and love us from this place. Otherwise, we're not showing up real. We're not giving the other person a chance to get to know us, right? And so was the story of my life. It was a hard pill to swallow, that I was actually presenting a false persona that's actually misleading. This is a hard pill for anybody that has, for example, people pleaser tendencies, right? We have to get really real, that we're not actually showing up real. We're not showing up fully and authentically ourselves. And so not only is that misleading for the other person, but we are also blocking ourselves, our true selves, from receiving true nourishment. Because true nourishment or love or connection can only flow from one person to us if we're showing up real, right? That's the only way. If we're showing up as a false persona, people might be sending us love, but we're not actually absorbing it because it's not us, right? So this is huge. So the one of the most important things about learning to have more open communication is that it prevents the poison of resentment that happens when our needs go unspoken and unmet. I know this is a really tough one for me to this day to fully digest, because yeah, this was the story of my marriage for that many years. There was so much resentment, but I had to own that I was not actually speaking my needs, right? The bar was super low. I wasn't speaking my needs. And so that was my side of the street that I had to take responsibility for. And so all of this goes hand in hand with our ability to set boundaries. I gave some good examples on the last slide. And it also just ties into just being responsible in relationships, showing up real, having real conversations. And it's not all about having tough conversations. It can also be about just like showing like your big, beautiful, open heart to people. Like, can you tell your people, like, I love you so much, right? Can you actually open to like that level of love and connection? And I know that this is one that to this day, I am still opening my heart to receive love and to also express it too, as well, right? And so for me, at the end of the day, excellent communication aligns with truth and authenticity. And so many people, in my community we're for truth, we're for freedom, but like what's going on with your communication skills in your relationship? Are you showing up real? Are you living in integrity, right? Are you living in truth, right? Like if you really want to claim that you want to live in a world of truth, are you embodying it, right? This is a huge blind spot for a lot of people. And when you start to realize the power of the word, this is a little bit more for the spiritually advanced people, the power of the word to create your reality. When you really start to own that, you step into a higher level of consciousness. So I'll just leave that there. Okay, we're almost done here. So these are just ways to go deeper. If you aren't familiar with me, this is what I work on with people very, very deeply. These are all the things that I work on with people one-on-one. And if this presentation lands for you, communication is definitely part of what we put into practice together. And I also have a group program I run a couple of times a year. I currently am taking the first cohort through it. It's called the Foundation. The second round is going to be in August, so stay tuned for that one. A big part of that is actually learning about boundaries and assertiveness, as well as these other really foundational core, right, of that strong, solid foundation. And so it's literally called the Foundation. So stay tuned, make sure you're on my email list or you're connected to me. And then the Visionaries is the membership community. It's a great option with amazing people from around the world. And so the doors will open in August again for you to jump in there. And so this is the end. And I'm going to go back here. Let's see who's with me. Okay, so we still have a few people. Thank you so much for being here and for showing up. Salome, Juliana, Eddie, so good to see you. Okay, cool. So you can type any questions in the chat. I'm going to stay for, probably 5-10 more minutes, depending on questions. This is good. I wrapped it up in less than an hour. So what do you think? Do you have any questions for me? Feel free. I'm just going to take a sip. I'll wait for you all to type. Yeah, and what do you think? What do you think about this? What style of communication do you resonate with? I would also love to hear. Even if you're watching the replay, feel free to type in questions or share whatever you want to, because I can come back and I can answer questions as well. Okay. I don't see any questions yet. I'll just wait one more minute. Oh my gosh, communication is something that has totally changed my life. And for the 100th time, please get this book, How to Be an Adult, David Rico, life-changing. Okay, Eddie says, I can definitely see how I've been a mix. Yeah, I can see that too. For me, it's more passive and maybe passive-aggressive. But you know what was interesting? I'm glad you mentioned that, Eddie, because what was interesting for me is that as I was trying to repair and move into assertive communication, this is part of the really messy human path of it. Sometimes, especially if you're somebody who has repressed or stuffed down for stuff for so long, sometimes it can come out in like this burst, right? So I did have a period, especially when I was learning to set boundaries, where it actually came out really strong, and really kind of almost aggressive, I guess you could say. And this is when I did have to say, hey, I'm sorry, on more than one occasion. Okay, Salome says, I used to be passive aggressive. I'm progressively being more assertive. Nice. Sometimes I tend to be too harsh. Yeah, I love this. I mean, I just want to say for everybody, there's no perfection here, right? It's not that we have to memorize what the healthy, perfect middle way is and then like force ourselves. But I will say that when we're learning these foundational skills, and we're making them, I always say, making them our North Star, we do need to know what it even is that we're shooting for. So for me, I had no idea what assertive, healthy communication even was, right? And so like a book like this was really helpful. Learning the actual nuts and bolts and the skills is huge. I think we actually, yeah, I'm glad Juliana's here because we just talked about this in our breathwork group for Gemini. of like how sometimes it really is about just learning the skills. What does this look like? What does this entail? Because otherwise, how are you going to know what to shoot for, right? Okay, Eddie says, what are some things to consider as I move toward the asking 100% of what I want from 100% of the people? Okay, that's a beautiful thing. I mean, I think the first place to start, this is obviously a big one. You and I can keep talking about this if I don't fully answer it. But like for many people, the first place to start is like, what do I really want? Like, what do I really want? The thing that brings my heart a lot of sadness of sometimes the people who come to me for support is that like when we talk about their relationships, maybe things are really out of balance and they're not reciprocal relationships. A lot of times it's really sad because the person actually doesn't know what they need. It makes me so sad, and I can relate to this too. But I think it's just about getting crystal clear within yourself of like what you need. So I think a good place to start, even for everyone watching, is like to take kind of like an assessment of the landscape of your relationships. Like at bare minimum, the close people to you, like the people who really mean the most, it can be really, really good to just spend some time reflecting on the state of your relationships. Like, what is going on? How are they feeling? How are they feeling? Like, is there anything that's in the air, right? Lingering. Maybe I've been sitting on this thing that I need to say. Like, I think it's really good to actually take some time. And so that's like one part of it, right? And then the other part is actually developing the courage to be able to maybe have a difficult conversation. There's so much here. It actually goes pretty, pretty deep. Let me think what else is intuitively coming here. Yeah, I would say, like, as you give yourself the grace and the compassion to move towards this, you just take one step forward. So it's not like overnight, we're just going to wake up and be like, okay, this is going to be the way in all of my relationships. But like, if you can just have that first conversation, right? Like, I was terrible at having courageous conversations. So it took me a while to actually build up the strength, the resilience, the courage. But for me, it really was a practice, right? Like I said before, having the courage to speak, even when your voice shakes. I can't tell you how many conversations where I went in just like my body was shaking, my voice was shaking, I was nauseous. Hopefully you don't have it to this extent, Eddie, but like I did. So I had to just like little by little, one step at a time forward. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't actually know if I actually ask 100% of the time, all the time. Like I'm still working on that one, but I've definitely gotten much better. Right. And so this is probably one where we don't have to necessarily hold ourselves to that level of perfection, but it's something to shoot for. Okay, so I have a few more minutes. I know there's still a few of you here. Is there anything else or any last words that you want to share? This was really good. Like I'm really glad. It makes me feel better to be teaching some of these foundational classes. And so we have this one on communication. We had the last one that I did on boundaries. And then we have the attachment style one, the codependency one. Yeah, and for people, those of you in the community, we have healing the relationship between men and women, which is the 3.5 hour big one. Oh, thanks, Salome. Okay, let's see if I missed it. Juliana. Oh, yes. Okay, thank you so much. What are your thoughts on requesting small behavior changes to a partner? For example, asking that if someone needs a break from the heated conversation, that we agree on a time to come back to it. Oh, I love that. Okay, so I mean, I love that. Okay, so I'm assuming that you're the one who wants that. So, I mean, I would say this is actually good because Joel and I have talked about this. We haven't quite had the conversation yet, but like I think it's really good to set ground rules for how to get through conflict, right? And so this is just one idea of you can bring it up to your partner or a friend or whoever it is, and maybe this is a person where you butt heads or like you are having difficulty with conflict. You can just kind of say like, I care about our relationship so much that, let's just like have some agreements, right? Let's just have like some ground rules that we can shoot for in conflict. And within that conversation, I think this would be really, really good to have in there, Juliana. This is a great one. So Juliana is basically saying that like if someone in a conflict is requesting a break and to step away, Juliana's saying that it's helpful to also have an agreement of like, we are going to come back and we're going to finish this conversation, right? We're going to come back to it. And that's a really good one. I'm glad you brought it up, Juliana, because sometimes people don't, right? They want to escape and then they don't actually take responsibility for coming back to it. They want to sweep it under the rug. So I love that. That is really part of healthy communication. Ground rules rather than requests. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. And of course, this is something that you can co-create with the other person. Yeah, ground rules for conflict. I think let me just think for a minute. I think there was a podcast episode where I touched on conflict and even like some ground rules that I like. So I'm going to try to see if I can find that, Juliana. If not, I have I put everything in my notes app on my phone. And so I kind of outlined some ground rules, if that's helpful. All right, I think we're going to wrap up. This is perfect at the hour. So thank you all so much. Yeah, just so much love to all of you who came live and also watching the replay. You're so welcome. You're so welcome. Thank you, Salme, I missed that one. I'm so sorry, Juliana. I'm still getting used to YouTube Live, but I do like this format. Yeah, you're so welcome, everybody. So if you are watching the replay, this one is going to stay up on YouTube. So please feel free to just type stuff in the chat, questions for me, different reflections, right? What landed for you, what was helpful. And you can also just book a free intro call for people who are new, and we can go deeper, right, together. I often give a lot of value. I'm able usually to go right in, right, and tell you the heart and the soul of of maybe what needs some love, care, and attention. So lots of love, everybody. I'll see you all very soon for those of you in the Visionaries, and happy Monday. Bye, everybody.